Good morning, I'm Sarah Borthwick and I'm a PhD student at Edinburgh Napier University. Today I'm going to talk to you about energy sustainability in the housing sector, some of the modern technologies available to us, and the use of energy cooperatives as a means to further the application of such technologies. Energy drives our existence and is crucial for the development of the human race. It is a requirement for the production of all goods and the provision of all services. We use it in everyday processes, from switching on a light to heating our homes to cooking our meals. Energy use has steadily increased over the past 20 years. When better means of producing ordered energy are developed, new uses are found and consequently the demand goes up. One factor which correlates to this is the growth of the population. As the human race evolves, we find more and more uses for energy in which to advance our way of living and quality of life. Along with forecasted population growth, energy consumption is also expected to grow. All this energy use does, however, come at a price. We are utilising limited supplies of fossil fuels, which make up around 70% of world primary energy demands. At our current rate of consumption, proven world coal resources should last about 200 years, oil for approximately 40 years, and natural gas for around 60 years, although different countries are at various stages in their stock depletion. Nevertheless, recent shale gas discoveries, including those witnessed early 2011 in India, may alter this scenario. What's more, we are emitting a harmful combination of greenhouse gases into our atmosphere. CO2 emissions have been increasing over the past few decades and are forecast for further growth if no action is taken. In respect of climate change and global warming, the build-up of such gases has detrimental effects upon temperature and a resulting influence upon health, wildlife, agriculture and the economy. The maps on the right-hand side demonstrate how the world is expected to warm as a result of climate change over the coming century. There is a growing consensus that past observations of temperature increase can be attributed to human activity. In 2007, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change concluded that it was very likely that most of the warming observed over the past 50 years could be attributed to human activities. Various government targets and agreements are in place, which aim to manage this growing problem both nationally and internationally. The Kyoto Protocol was agreed in 1997 for industrial nations to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to 5.2% lower than 1990 levels. The target date for this ranged between 2008 and 2012. We're currently in 2011 and very few nations have managed to meet their target, although the UK appears very much on track. The Climate Change Scotland Act, receiving royal assent in 2009, has a target of an 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 and an interim target of 42% by 2020. This very ambitious target signifies the commitment of Scotland in mitigating the serious threat of climate change. The action we take over the next 20 to 30 years will influence the outcome of future generations to come. The Stern report concluded that there is still time to avoid the worst impacts of climate change, but only if action is taken now. The report advocates the cost of mitigation to be around 1% of global gross domestic product, a significant but manageable amount, whereas the costs of mitigation are up to 20 times greater if we delay taking action. In an effort to work towards these targets, we look to alternative sources of energy. The need for this arises from two realities: increasing pollution and dwindling supplies of fossil fuels. Alternative forms of energy are those that don't include fossil fuels or carbon combustion products such as gasoline, coal, natural gas, and so on. Some of these alternatives can also be renewable, that is, being able to replenish themselves without any human effort, and thus relieving our dependency upon declining supplies of fossil fuels. The issue of sustainability should also be considered, which are not only renewable, but also have the ability to keep the planet's ecosystems up and running for the indefinite future. In relation to annual world energy consumption, the diagram reveals the potential for solar power to be huge, as shown by the blue square around the outside. And although other renewable sources such as wind are not quite as large, the capability still exists. Targets are also in place for the uptake of renewables. For instance, in 2009, the Renewable Energy Directive set a target for the UK that 15% of energy consumption should come from renewable sources by the year 2020. The wider picture for the European Union is for a target of 20%. The Scottish Government's own target, initially set at 50%, has now been raised so that 80% of Scottish electricity consumption is to come from renewable sources by 2020. Scotland is also on course to both meet and exceed its interim target of 31% for renewables by the year 2011. There is no shortage of energy itself, only that of ordered and usable energy. The key is to find greater efficiency in our everyday processes so that we can maintain our current lifestyles whilst reducing the impact of our actions. The good news is that there are still time to avoid the worst impacts of climate change, but only if action is taken now. Various technologies are available for harbouring these alternative sources of energy, including that of solar and wind. The sun radiates a vast amount of energy onto the Earth's surface. People use less energy in 27 years than the solar energy reaching the Earth in one day. The annual solar radiation received by the Earth is almost 9 times greater than the total reserves of non-renewable energy resources. It is the cleanest source of energy in the world, it is of infinite supply, and is also renewable. The level of irradiation varies by time, location, and season. The quality of the sunlight is also crucial, taking into account issues such as the degree of cloud cover and shading from nearby trees, buildings, and so on. Even in Scotland and the rest of the UK, which is perhaps not the sunniest of climates, the potential still exists for solar power, even when diffused through cloud. Research in Edinburgh suggests the daily availability of around 12 hours of sunlight. There are 2 basic uses of solar energy, to generate electricity and to heat water. For the direct conversion of radiation, the necessary technology comprises of photovoltaic panels and thermal water heaters respectively. Taking photovoltaic panels first. Semiconductors in the PV cells convert the solar radiation received into a raw electrical signal upon contact. This is made from purified silicon, of which there are several types with varying levels of quality, efficiency, and cost. Average efficiencies in the UK range from 12 to 18%, and researchers expect this to reach up to 30% in the future. To maximise the power and surface area, PV cells are grouped together to form rectangular modules. Once the electrical signal has been produced, it is then transferred to an inverter, which converts this into a usable alternating or AC current. From that point, the power can then be used in the home or business. Excess electricity can also be sold back to the utility company via the grid for use by other customers, known as net metering. Access to the grid can also be advantageous for coping with fluctuations in demand and changes in weather conditions. Alternatively, systems can operate remotely when it would be inconvenient or expensive for grid access. The capital costs of PV include not only the cost of the PV modules themselves, but also the cost of forming arrays and the necessary support infrastructure, including land, cabling, inverters, etc., plus the cost of either storage batteries or connection to the grid. Although the initial capital cost will be high, an average system can cost around £12,000, the running costs will be extremely low. It does not require fuel, solar energy is free to collect, and it has no moving parts, which is reflected in low maintenance costs. A reduction in energy bills will also become apparent. In terms of the uptake of PV, Europe is leading the way with almost 70% of the world's cumulative PV power. Over the last decade, the growth in PV in Europe has been exceptional. In the year 2000, only 189 megawatts were installed. The figure since then has risen by over 8,000%, bordering almost 16 gigawatts in 2009. In relation to other countries in Europe, the UK has the lowest amount of solar radiation available for collection and a relatively low level of adoption. Nevertheless, estimates suggest a more favourable positioning of solar in the UK. For instance, solar energy from buildings is reported to exceed that of peak oil production, and in relation to electricity consumption, solar electrical generation can contribute around 2/3 of UK demand. Furthermore, the UK market for solar PV has experienced significant growth in the number of installations in recent years, and forecasts anticipate this trend to continue. Estimates suggest an increase in the range of 50% for each year through to 2014. The second use of solar power relates to thermal water heaters. This basically captures energy from solar radiation, passes the heat onto the transfer fluid, which then heats the water. There are 2 main types of solar thermal collectors, the glazed flat plate and the evacuated tube collectors. The glazed flat plate is made up of a tray or frame with a layer of insulation to prevent heat loss. Copper pipes are positioned in a serpentine arrangement to carry the heat transfer liquid through the collector. The evacuated tube collector, on the other hand, has a manifold with a series of glass tubes which are parallel in assembly. A vacuum is created within the tube, which effectively acts as an insulator for the absorber. The two types of system offer similar efficiencies in both transmission and absorption, but thermal efficiency is greater in the evacuated tube collector owing to the presence of a vacuum. The solar energy received in the UK for thermal water heaters is comparable to that in Europe, with Birmingham shown in red. Even in Scotland, the Energy Saving Trust estimates that thermal water heaters are capable of displacing 50% of hot water needs in households. In the winter months, this figure will be reduced by 10 to 20% due to changes in weather and temperature. This could, in turn, save up to £38 million a year if thermal water heaters were fitted to every house in Scotland. The saving in CO2 is equivalent to the removal of a small car from the road per system installed. Although the UK has the lowest amount of daily solar radiation in Europe, it does not, however, have the lowest uptake of solar water heaters, with 175.6 megawatt thermal. And in terms of both Scotland and the UK's energy needs, the use of thermal water heaters can help to meet demand, and forecasters expect a growth in uptake over the coming years. Solar water heaters can be used in almost every climate and help meet some of our energy needs. Like the PV technology, thermal water heaters require little maintenance, solar energy is free to collect, and a reduction in energy bills will become apparent. Although Scotland is a suitable climate for thermal water heaters, the effectiveness of the technology is dependent upon the quality of sunlight. The risk of freezing in lower temperatures is also a possible problem. The upfront capital cost is, however, likely to be the biggest drawback and thus hinder the widespread uptake of the technology, typically costing around £5,000. However, the relative costs per kilowatt of installed thermal and PV power have fallen over the past 25 years or so. This can be attributed to technological improvements, greater efficiency, and reduced material costs, all of which will help to make the market for both PV and thermal water heaters more attractive to the consumer. The second source of alternative energy that we'll look at today is wind power. Global air currents arise when the sun heats and cools various parts of the world at different rates, so essentially it follows on from solar power. The UK has a natural geographic advantage for wind power, particularly Scotland as shown by the dark blue. It is in fact the best wind resource in Europe. The potential therefore exists for both Scotland and the UK to become a world leader in wind energy technologies. The potential to harness wind power is immense, and this sector has one of the fastest growing renewable electricity technologies, with an average of 40% growth per annum. Wind energy is clean, efficient and renewable, and emits no harmful greenhouse gas emissions or other pollutants into the atmosphere when in use. The level of support for the use of wind power has remained consistent, with between 70 and 80% support, as shown from the various studies conducted over the past decade. And similarly, the level of disagreement has also remained below the 10% mark. As was demonstrated earlier, the capability in the UK for wind power is substantial. However, the level of wind power installed does not match this potential. The UK is one of the top 5 countries in Europe, but the two biggest players, Germany and Spain, have a capacity of at least 5 times greater. Nevertheless, since 2002, the UK has witnessed a growth of over 500% by the year 2009. Forecasts for the future anticipate more than 100,000 megawatts of wind power in Europe by the year 2030, and worldwide the figure is expected to reach between 180 and 474 gigawatts by the year 2020. Wind turbines can be used to capture kinetic energy and turn it into electricity. Wind turbines use large blades to catch the wind, which turns the propellers, forcing the alternator to turn and thus generate usable AC power. In terms of smaller scale or micro wind turbines, there are 2 main types: those mounted on the roof of a building and set up in a position of great wind exposure, and those freestanding, again situated where there is a suitable degree of wind. Mast-mounted turbines are often larger in size than those hosted on rooftop locations, and thus have a larger price tag attached. Small-scale micro-wind turbines have been found to have a low efficiency level, and research suggests they tend to underachieve and fail to contribute substantially towards annual energy needs of a typical dwelling. The capacity factor is a measure of how effectively the wind turbine can harness the available energy. Micro wind turbines offer a capacity factor of only 4% on average, and less than 1% in some cases. MIDI turbines, on the other hand, look more promising, with a capacity factor between 13 and 33%. They have been shown to perform adequately, although rural farms offer the greatest potential for this. Macro wind turbines, however, seem to offer the best solution for the bulk supply of electricity, with the greatest power and energy production potential. Research suggests that large-scale wind turbines can deliver 50% of the UK electricity demand, with only a very small proportion of land being used. However, this also has a high price tag attached. Connection to the grid is also possible, where excess electricity can be sold back to the utility company, as can be done with solar PV electricity, or systems can operate remotely with batteries to store the unused electricity for a time when there is no wind. Further aspects for consideration include the design of the turbine, whether horizontal or vertical axis design, and whether upwind or downwind, the number of blades, cut-in and cut-out limits, the need for stabilisation, and the exact location of the turbine, taking into account the wind speed and nearby obstacles, this perhaps being one of the very first points to consider when evaluating the options. In a means to support the uptake of these renewable technologies, policies are in place which offer financial incentives to the user. As was shown earlier, technologies such as solar PV, thermal water heaters and wind turbines generally require a high capital cost at the outset, which can in many cases deter the initial purchase, although financial savings will be made in due course. Policies can be in place to further accentuate the future benefits from generating your own electricity and hot water. In respect of electricity from solar PV and wind turbines, the feed-in tariff scheme provides clean energy cashback as a further financial reward from April 2010. This guarantees a minimum payment for both the electricity generated and also the excess exported back to the grid. A fixed rate is offered for every kilowatt hour generated, including the electricity actually used in the property. Furthermore, electricity exported back to the grid is worthy of an additional supplement as an extra benefit. The payment received is made in addition to the bill savings from using the electricity generated on site. Payments are also exempt from income tax if the electricity is used within a household, although businesses and organisations in the public sector are still taxable. Different rates are offered depending upon the technology, its size or capacity, and whether included on a new building or fitted retrospectively. Upon joining the scheme, the same tariff is used over either 20 or 25 years for wind and solar PV respectively, and the tariff is also linked to the retail price index in that it varies in line with inflation. The electricity exported back to the grid is awarded an extra 3 pence per kilowatt hour, the figure being constant for all technologies, as a further incentive. The more established system of renewable obligation certificates, or ROCs, is still partly in existence, and the rules surrounding its use today depend upon the exact date of installation and previous entitlements to financial help. And a standard rate of 9 pence per kilowatt hour is payable for all technologies, plus 3 pence extra for exports back to the grid. In respect of thermal water heaters, there exists a new policy measure to help encourage uptake, known as the Renewable Heat Incentive, or RHI. Expected to be launched mid-2011, the RHI is designed to provide financial support for individuals, communities and businesses who switch from using fossil fuels for heating to that of renewables. Research has shown that the use of long-term national policy measures, such as this, can better saturate and strengthen the market for thermal water heaters, as demonstrated in other European countries. The tariffs are calculated to help bridge the financial gap between the cost of conventional and renewable heat systems, plus an investment rate of return of 6% for solar thermal. A fixed amount of either 17 or 18 pence per kilowatt hour of renewable heat delivered, depending upon the size of the system, would be paid annually for the duration of 20 years. Eligibility is also dependent upon a cut-off installation date of 15th July 2009. Payments can be made either upon the exact amount of heat produced, accurately derived by a meter, or upon an estimation of what the technology installed is likely to produce. Tariff payments are also exempt from income tax when the energy is used in the home. Further fiscal instruments can be used, as suggested by the research on screen, to help increase the uptake of both solar PV and thermal water heaters. These include a suggested reduction in council tax, proportionate to the renewable energy generated, or perhaps the level exported back to the grid. A lessening of planning restrictions for the installation of renewable technologies is also suggested. Nevertheless, it is feasible for these incentives to apply to the installation of wind turbines to help encourage their uptake. So we've covered 3 renewable technologies which can be used to provide us with electricity and hot water in our buildings, neighbourhoods and cities. There is now a growing interest in cooperative approaches to renewable energy, which can be used to achieve scale, manage risk and raise capital whilst maintaining the benefits locally. The idea of cooperation can be observed historically when tribes were organised for mutual benefit, allocating jobs and resources amongst each other and trading with external communities. The first formal society founded upon cooperation took place in 1761 with the Fenwick Weavers' Society in East Ayrshire, which sought to promote and maintain high standards in the weaving craft and provide benefits to its members. From then, various associations have been established based on cooperation, in cotton mills in 1810, newspapers and banks in the 1870s, and colleges in the early 1990s. Today, cooperatives have grown into a global force with over 800 million members, supporting the livelihood of almost 3 billion people around the world. In Scotland alone, cooperatives make a significant contribution to the economy, employing 28,600 people and producing over £4 billion in turnover. Cooperatives operate in almost every sector of the economy, from education to consultancy to manufacturing and engineering. In spite of the large number of cooperative enterprises present globally, initial perceptions of what a cooperative actually is appears to be somewhat naive. In many cases, knowledge hardly stretches beyond awareness of the Cooperative Group, the UK's largest cooperative, whose portfolio includes food, travel, pharmacies, funeral care, and both legal and financial services. Beyond the high street name, research shows that people are aware of the cooperative difference, but are not sure why nor what it actually involves. A cooperative business is owned and controlled by its members, who can be employees, businesses, or consumers. They are set up to meet a common need, whether economic, social, or cultural, and are run on a democratic basis. Cooperatives are typically run for the mutual benefit of the members and have a strong sense of ethics and social responsibility. Profits can be distributed amongst members or invested in local projects. In the current economic climate, cooperation with others helps to reduce risk and enables economic, environmental, and community benefits to be realised. All cooperatives are run according to 7 key principles as agreed by the International Cooperative Alliance, which are central to the running of the enterprise and will help ensure its success. The principles are: 1. That cooperatives are voluntary organisations open to all persons. 2. They should be democratic and control should be exerted by the members who actively participate in setting policies and making decisions. 3. That members contribute equitably to the capital of their cooperative. 4. Cooperatives should be independent and self-help organisations. 5. Education and training should be provided for the members, elected representatives, managers and employees so they can contribute effectively towards the development of the cooperative. 6. That cooperatives help strengthen the cooperative movement by working together through local, national, regional and international structures. And finally 7. That cooperatives work for the sustainable development of their communities. A setup such as this helps deliver superior business performance and sustainability, with a long-term survival rate of cooperative enterprises almost twice that of investor-owned firms. Cooperative ownership of renewable energy projects is common in many countries in Europe. It has been observed by Energy for All that countries adopting the cooperative approach, with individuals and societies getting involved and working together, have had the greatest success with renewable energy. Evidence from both Scotland and other countries leads to a suggestion that cooperatives play an increasing and significant role in the renewable energy sector. There are 3 main proven business models in the renewable energy sector which can be adapted to suit any business: the cooperative consortium, the employee-owned business, and the community cooperative. Let's review these in turn. First, A cooperative consortium is a collaboration of businesses who want to buy, produce and sell more effectively while still retaining original brands, independence and control. The benefits of doing so can help share risks and reduce costs through economies of scale, whilst gaining access to new opportunities and new processes. In terms of the renewable energy sector, engineering businesses could choose to come together to win substantial contracts as major suppliers to the energy industry. Specialist skills relating to energy infrastructure, in which to build, develop and maintain the technologies, can also be accumulated. The sharing of costs such as promotion and advertising is also possible, along with the centralisation of resources and administration. Increased buying power in terms of discounts and the conditions surrounding new contracts may also arise due to the consortium. As a simple example in the renewable energy sector, a Swedish cooperative was created comprising of forest owners, private sawmills and a Swedish wood products company in which to collect forest chips and sawmill byproducts and supply around 3.5 billion kilowatts of wood fuel. In terms of the future of wind power, the strict financial and operational requirements may prove challenging for smaller suppliers in the tendering process. The consortium business model is a potential solution, with smaller suppliers teaming up as a larger entity who may find themselves able to better compete for major contracts. Next, we have employee-owned businesses where, as the name suggests, employees rather than external shareholders hold the majority of the shares and control in a business. This may arise as a result of an employee buyout, which can help secure the future of the business and its employees and help keep jobs and wealth creation in the local economy. The employees themselves will have a greater say in decision-making, with more control over issues such as company strategy and working conditions. This, in turn, can lead to a greater sense of individual well-being and fulfilment in their employment. An interest in the environment and that of sustainable development within their local area is also common. As an example, EGA is a Newcastle-based renewable energy supplier, which is 37% owned by its 4,500 employees and partners. Created in 1990, EGA works with public bodies, schools, hospitals and businesses to help drive the carbon agenda and deliver improvements in energy efficiency across residential and commercial sectors. Following the cooperative way, EGA advocate the strength of their company to come from their ownership structure, which helps ensure a commitment to the values and objectives of the company. The model of employee ownership has been shown to drive engagement and deliver increased profitability within the company. EGA also focuses upon local communities, particularly the more vulnerable ones, which also ties into the cooperative theme. EGA have multiple area programs to help support disadvantaged communities and create low-carbon neighbourhoods. There is also a further avenue which can be explored by such companies, which involves forming an alliance with homeowners for the exploitation of solar energy. EGA have signed agreements with local authorities, housing associations and management organisations to install PV modules at low or zero cost to the consumer, who then recoup the cost of installation by collection of the feed-in tariff revenue as outlined earlier. Consumers benefit from free electricity from the sun, which will thus lower electricity bills. Estimates suggest by up to 1/3. EGA also maintain the system for a period of 25 years, which reduces the worry for consumers. Essentially, this can be thought of as a rent my roof space scheme, where the solar panel owner is, in effect, renting the roof space from the customer. A similar such scheme could also apply to thermal water heaters, where the collection of the renewable heat incentive could be used to recoup the costs of initial installation. And finally, community cooperatives are owned by their customers or members in which to provide the goods and services which are required. A community can include those within a certain geographical area and those who share common values. Such cooperatives are owned, controlled and run for the benefit of those living in an area and/or having a common interest. Community ownership has many benefits, including a direct stake in a local project, an individual commitment to low-carbon initiatives, and an attractive rate of return to the members. This can also lead to individual empowerment and fulfilment and increased loyalty towards the project. Subsequently, both the economic and environmental benefits are maintained in the local area, including the financial return and the renewable energy generated for the community. Education and training support can also be provided on environmental issues. And finally, cooperatives are also positioned as part of a nationwide network of other green cooperatives, which can offer support and aid the development process of newer cooperatives. In respect of the technologies outlined earlier, community cooperatives can allow collective investment in and ownership of renewable energy assets such as wind farms, photovoltaic panels and thermal water heaters, spread over a community level. Shared ownership allows the members of the cooperative to spread the risk and maximise the return on their investment. Taking wind turbines first, it is possible for a community cooperative to be set up amongst individuals and/or households. Funds are raised from a public share issue in which to purchase a share in a wind farm. Electricity is then received to the local community, and the excess can of course be exported back to the national grid. Every year, members will receive an annual dividend from their shares, which is the profit from the sale of green electricity. Share capital is also given back at the end of the project lifetime. The minimum cost to become a member is £250, where almost everyone can join a green energy cooperative, whilst the maximum is £20,000, where one member equals one vote in the strategic decisions made by the cooperative. Preference for membership is given to those people living in areas where the wind farms are developed to keep the benefits as local as possible. As a case study, the Boyndee Wind Farm Cooperative was set up in 2005, allowing the community of Banffshire in Aberdeenshire to own a share in the first Scottish wind farm cooperative. Based at a former World War II airfield, the farm has a total of 7 turbines, and planning permission has recently been acquired for an 8th turbine. At present, the turbine generates enough electricity to meet the demands of 8,500 homes when operating at full capacity. There are 716 members who raised a total of £730,000 at the initial share launch, who all receive annual interest on their shares. Similar schemes around Scotland include the wind farm near Dunvegan on the Isle of Skye. The site has 10 2.3 megawatt Enercon wind turbines, having raised over £800,000 from 570 members in which to purchase a stake in the project. The 10 turbines are capable of generating enough green energy to supply around 14,000 homes. There are also plans for an extension to take place with 2 further turbines. The Great Glen Energy Cooperative has 16 2.5 megawatt turbines located in the hills north of Invergarry and southwest of Fort Augustus. The wind farm can meet the electrical needs of over 22,000 households, which could displace up to 84,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide each year, which would have otherwise been produced by a power station using fossil fuels. Finally, the Kilbrore Wind Energy Cooperative has the largest scale of those in Scotland, with 19 turbines and a proposed extension for a further 8 turbines, located in the Strathbrora area of the Highlands. Up to 27,000 homes could be catered for with the electricity generated, equivalent to 107,000 tonnes of CO2 from traditional fuel sources which could be saved. The Edinburgh Community Energy Cooperative Limited is a more local example, which was set up in 2007. This not-for-profit, member-owned organisation was created to give the residents of Edinburgh a way to promote and develop renewable and low-carbon energy in the city. So I'm now joined by Douglas Prentice, who is the Deputy Chief Executive of GeoCapita. Douglas is involved in developing, financing and risk managing clean tech projects. So Douglas, could you first of all give us an overview of the Edinburgh Community Energy Cooperative?
The North Edinburgh Energy Cooperative was set up by Mark Lazarevich, the local MP for North Edinburgh Leith, to increase public engagement in renewable energy projects. I've had a number of meetings with them, and the objective of the cooperative is to widen engagement from people within the constituency and more broadly around Edinburgh in renewable energy projects.
So what type of low carbon energy initiatives does the cooperative undertake?
My discussions with them were pertaining to the Lothian Waste Project, which is the project to reprocess Edinburgh and Midlothian's waste at a facility in Miller Hill in East Edinburgh. So rather than landfilling municipal waste, which is what happens at the moment down at Dunbar at the old Blue Circle cement factory site, the idea is to reprocess it into combined heat and power in East Edinburgh. So that's been my discussions with them, but I am aware that they have also got plans to develop wind and solar photovoltaic electricity generation projects in the Edinburgh area.
So although the scheme is geographically constrained to North Edinburgh and the Leith area, is this the type of model that could be replicated in other locations throughout Scotland or even the UK?
Indeed, and beyond Scotland and the UK, there are no real geographic boundaries as to the applicability of a cooperative or a mutual. It could be anywhere. And in fact, I know the regions of the world where the greatest growth in new cooperatives is actually in Asia, in India and in China. But speaking specifically about Scotland, there's no reason why the North Edinburgh Energy Cooperative would be restricted to North Edinburgh. It could be operating anywhere.
So I'm aware that the City of Edinburgh Council have agreed a target of a 25% reduction in carbon by 2015, a 35% reduction by 2025 and to be carbon free by 2050. Do you think that renewable energy cooperatives such as this one have an important role to play in helping to meet this target?
I think potentially a very important role because public engagement to decarbonise various economic activities really requires extensive involvement of the local community. So I think the idea of a community energy cooperative or similar type of structure is ideally suited to increasing local engagement, utilisation of renewable energy, sustainable transport, waste reduction, general strategies designed to reduce carbon emissions. So I think, yeah, a cooperative model or a hybrid cooperative commercial model is in fact highly desirable in terms of achieving that local public engagement.
Cooperatives can also be used on a more individual level within the community. For instance, a cooperative could be created which, as an entity, can approach suppliers of photovoltaic panels, thermal water heaters, and even small-scale micro-wind turbines. A substantial order, sufficient for the whole community and individual households and buildings, can receive very generous discounts from suppliers, as opposed to separate orders by single members of the community. Energy cooperatives can therefore play an important role in purchasing large quantities of renewable technologies at a price that would perhaps not be feasible at individual levels. For instance, EGA operates a group sharing scheme for a minimum of 5 homes. Whether it be a few homes on the street or a formal member organisation such as a cooperative, cost savings can be achieved and passed on to consumers. As an example of its application, Newcastle-based Community Energy Solutions is a non-profit distributing community interest company set up in 2006 which aims to assist local authorities and housing associations in making their homes more energy efficient, with a target of 2,000 PV systems across the North East, Yorkshire and Humberside in a 2-year period. Community Energy Solutions aims to introduce the technology which enhances energy and carbon efficiency, operating through the Go Solar and Go Warm brands, thus reducing the burden of energy costs, particularly upon the more disadvantaged members of the community. Resources are pooled together between funding organisations, solution partners, including suppliers, and those installing and maintaining the equipment for the most cost-effective package for consumers. Knowledge transfer also takes place with households to help understand the associated benefits of energy efficiency in the home and identify possible sources of funding or grants to help with the financial side of the development. Contributions are also made to local projects in the community in terms of regional regeneration. Renew Energy Solutions Limited is another good example of an energy cooperative formed to develop, fund and manage sustainable energy solutions for the benefit of the communities to whom they are accountable. Renew Energy Solutions works with new builds and existing properties, public and private sectors, housing and other energy users. A 5-stage project generation process has been derived. 1. Registration of interest. 2. Initial appraisal. 3. Project development. 4. Contract and financial close. And 5. The actual implementation. Following the cooperative model, this provides consumer protection, a high level of trust, and a cooperative dividend. Training is also provided to local communities. For instance, roofers and electricians are trained to gain MCS accredited installer status. Links with training partners are also being established, as new courses are being created with colleges and training centres in respect of the building industry and microgeneration. Additional employment opportunities are also available in the community, such as surveying properties, assembling the PV kits, repairs and maintenance, and managing the warehouse with PV modules. Renew Energy Solutions is also advocating the idea of free PV to consumers upon the collection of the feed-in tariff, like EGA as outlined earlier. In the long term, it is also possible for community cooperatives to actively engage in the manufacturing of their own renewable technologies. Setting up a fabrication plant in which to produce thermal water heaters, wind turbine components and PV panels will reduce the cost of these technologies, as all activities would be undertaken on a not-for-profit basis. However, this would involve a much greater commitment, further finance and training, a process likely to take at least 10 to 15 years to be fully established. Nevertheless, it would result in further employment opportunities for the community and a further source of income if selling the products out with the local domain. By and large, communities can become increasingly self-sufficient in terms of energy use. A model community for renewable energy can be seen in the Isle of Egg in the Outer Hebrides. Following a community buyout for £1.5 million in 1997, when ownership of the island was passed to the residents, a series of projects have been embarked upon for the wider benefit of the members, including property renovations and forestry improvements. The idea of renewable energy for electricity was also identified, and as of 1 February 2008, a new electrical grid went live with 3 hydro generators, 4 wind turbines and several solar panels, a project costing around £1.6 million. The independent electricity grid now supplies power to all 86 residents and small businesses, meeting up to 95% of the island's energy requirements. A limit of 5 kilowatts for domestic and small businesses and 10 kilowatts for larger businesses has been set, with installed energy monitors to allow for prudence. Surplus power is conserved in batteries, which can provide power for up to 24 hours, and 2 80-kilowatt diesel generators are available as an emergency backup. The introduction of renewable energy has reduced CO2 emissions by 32% during a 12-month period. The island is much more self-sufficient, with greater electrical energy security. Living standards and quality of life have improved, plus the acquiring of new skills and employment opportunities in terms of the maintenance of the technologies. The model for development and the type of system used on the island have much potential for replication in other communities, not just those in rural areas. Communities have realised that they can make a difference in terms of energy use, where the benefits can be felt both locally and internationally, with less dependence upon limited and dwindling sources of energy. To help encourage the uptake of cooperatives, there are specialist organisations which help with the set-up and successful launch of such entities. Energy for All is one of them, including its Scottish subordinate, Energy for All Scotland. So could you first of all tell us about Energy for All?
Yes, Energy for All are a wind farm cooperative. They assist other cooperatives or people that would like to establish cooperatives to set up cooperatives, develop sites, wind farm sites around the UK. They've been doing that for quite a number of years now, and they have in fact pioneered the concept of the hybrid commercial cooperative structure for wind farms.
So what is the structure of Energy for All like in terms of the cooperative models?
Energy for All, I believe, is comprised of 7 other local energy cooperatives, and they have 5 models of engagement between the cooperative, each individual cooperative, and the private sector wind farm developer and operator. The 2 which are most relevant to what we're doing are the co-ownership model, where the cooperative and the private sector developer jointly own and operate the asset. And the second model is the revenue sharing agreement, where they derive revenue and share it from the electricity, from the generation from the wind farm, and they apportion that between the private sector operator and the local cooperative on pre-agreed terms.
So what type of services do Energy for All offer?
Basically, they assist local groups, local communities, landowners, farmers, and people such as that to set up cooperative structures for wind farms in their location, help them with planning permissions, site acquisition, finding private sector wind farm developers that can partner with them in the hybrid model, and generally assisting and promoting the development of hybrid commercial cooperative wind farm operations around the UK.
I believe there's quite an attractive rate of return to investors. Could you tell us about that?
My understanding is that they've been running for quite a number of years now, originally coming out of Bay Wind, as I mentioned, and I understand they've been able to pay to their investors, local citizens that have invested in their own individual cooperatives, around 7 or 8% per annum, which, as I'm sure we all understand, is really quite an attractive rate of return in the current financial situation.
And what happens to the share capital at the end of the project?
At the end of the term of the project, typically 25 years, it would be returned to the investors.
So it's an added financial benefit. So what type of projects have Energy for All been interested in up to now?
Hitherto their work has really been in wind farms, but I believe that they are exploring other areas of renewable energy generation.
And is it feasible that the focus of Energy for All could shift towards that of solar technologies, including solar photovoltaic panels or thermal water heaters?
Yes, absolutely. The validity of the model is quite widespread. It doesn't just have to be restricted to use of wind cooperatives. It could be for solar PV, solar thermal, it could be for energy from waste projects. A variety of local community energy generation projects would be appropriate for their type of model.
Another key player for Scotland is Cooperative Development Scotland, which seeks to flourish the market for cooperative enterprises. So I'm now joined by Sarah Deas. Sarah is the Chief Executive of Cooperative Development Scotland, which is a subsidiary of Scottish Enterprise. So Sarah, first of all, could you tell us in your own words what a cooperative is, what it actually means?
It's a business that's owned and controlled by its members who have a shared interest, and it's run in a democratic manner.
So how would a cooperative differ in terms of, for instance, day-to-day running or decision-making with that of a traditional business model?
Well, it's principally that decision-making element whereby each member may have one vote, for example, or the voting power may relate to the level of benefit that members get from the cooperative. Whichever way, it's about a fair democratic approach to decision-making.
So I'm aware that there are several different types of cooperative models. Would you be able to run through the main types?
Yes, well, there's principally three. There's the consortia of businesses, there is the employee ownership model, and thirdly, there's the community cooperative. So taking the first one, a business consortia, that allows businesses to come together to get scale in buying, producing or selling. It may also reduce the risk to any one of those businesses by working in this collaborative manner. Employee ownership is a more of an internal form of collaboration where a business is owned by the employees or possibly by an employee ownership trust. So the advantage here is it helps root a business in its locality, and also through the engagement of the employees will ultimately lead to greater productivity and growth. And then the community cooperative is owned by individuals. So there's maybe individuals in a physical location or a community of interest, and they would invest in that community venture and have a shared influence in terms of how it is run.
So is a cooperative an effective way of running a business in terms of performance and sustainability?
Yes, The advantage a cooperative has is that you're involving the members who have a direct interest in the business, in the decision-making process. So that brings that level of ownership and interest that you will usually result in a higher performing venture.
So how can cooperative models apply to the renewable energy sector, for instance? So taking wind technology first.
Well, the community form of ownership would work well within wind. So that's where individuals within a community would personally invest in that cooperative venture. There are restrictions on the level of investment that one can make through the legislation. That at this moment in time, £20,000 is the upper limit. Clearly not everybody would want to invest that level. So a cooperative would set a band, and it may be for a lower limit of £250 up to that higher limit. But what that allows is those individuals to get the benefits of renewable energy personally, and there would also be a requirement for the community to benefit, the community in the whole, from that venture.
So same sort of question, but applying this to solar technologies, would cooperative models be feasible?
Yes, indeed. Most likely with solar, where you would be putting the panels on a building, that the members would be the residents or the owners of that building. So they will come together to pool their investment capability and would have agreed how the decision-making processes will operate in a fair manner.
Okay. So suppose, for instance, I had an idea and I got together with a few other people, a few other groups, and decided that a cooperative model was what we wanted to pursue. So what would happen after we approached Cooperative Development Scotland?
Well, we'd obviously sit down and get to understand the idea that you have, understand how far you've advanced your thinking. Has there a feasibility study been undertaken? Have you got to the business planning stage? Clearly there may be planning restrictions that you need to take on board. All these types of things that were part of that sort of due diligence process. We wouldn't actually provide that form of support ourselves, but we'll be able to guide you to the mainstream advisory resources. Where our role would come in would be looking at how best to structure the cooperative, looking at the alternative routes to finance it, and also looking at how to engage the members in a decision-making capacity.
So do you provide finance at all, or is it more directing people to possible sources of finance?
Yes, we don't provide finance ourselves, so it is one of identifying what source would be most appropriate for the particular venture.
Do you have many partners that you can call upon to help with finance, for instance, in other areas?
There are providers in the marketplace, mainstream banks and other specialist forms of finance. Clearly for a cooperative, if it's a community cooperative, one form of finance is from its own members. A very important aspect to the cooperative venture. And
would Cooperative Development Scotland be able to support existing cooperatives, or is the focus more towards setting up a new one and getting it established?
Well, our remit most definitely includes existing cooperatives, but what we do find is that at that stage in their development, their particular needs are more likely to be those that relate to the mainstream support available from the Business Gateway or Scottish Enterprise or Highlands and Islands Enterprise, rather than unique aspects about being a cooperative.
Cooperatives are of interest to the government in respect of economic development in the community. Cooperatives keep both the business or entity and the wealth it creates locally, which also supports the local economy. Survival rates are higher for cooperatives, which make them a more sustainable choice for businesses and have a positive impact upon employment opportunities. The nature of cooperative projects is likely to lead to personal development on an individual level, with greater entrepreneurial and business skills, together with a greater sense of empowerment and fulfilment in their job. Indeed, the new Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition government has shown support for cooperatives, arguing the innovation and enthusiasm of civil society is essential for tackling the social, economic and political challenges the UK faces. Backing exists for the creation and expansion of mutual, cooperatives and social enterprises, including that of employee-owned cooperatives and community organisations. And in Scotland, the Scottish Government has recently tripled the funding for community renewables and microgeneration. The Climate Challenge Fund is inspiring community-based action all over Scotland, with over £25 million being made available to communities to pursue their own ideas. This fund can be used to support community engagement and feasibility stages of proposed energy generation projects. The Communities and Renewables Energy Scheme, or CARES as it is often referred, offers both grant support and an information toolkit to further complement the Climate Challenge Fund and other such programmes. Ministers are very keen to see the benefits from renewables accrue in communities.
Today we have reviewed the use of several renewable technologies and the various cooperative approaches which can be adopted. Let's now summarise the key points and identify what we can take away from this.
This video has focused upon the use of renewable technologies for the generation of electricity and hot water in our buildings. In the context of increasing levels of pollution and dwindling supplies of fossil fuels, the use of alternative sources of energy is something we must all seriously consider. The technology does exist and is becoming increasingly available. We have also outlined the various cooperative approaches to renewable energy, which are attracting increasing levels of interest. Cooperation brings many advantages to society, not just those relating to the environment, but also the financial, economic and social benefits. Cooperatives can be adapted to suit all types of situations, and there are also various advisory bodies who can offer information and guidance.
Having watched this video, start thinking about areas in your work and community where cooperatives could apply. What collaborations could be achieved and for what mutual benefit? Which of the three business models would be best suited, whether a cooperative consortium, an employee-owned business or a community cooperative?
Cooperation puts something back into society. It makes a difference and helps give people opportunities to better themselves. It's a different way of running a business. Perhaps it's a better way of running a business. It doesn't matter whether there are 2 people involved or 2,000. The cooperative movement can happen anywhere and people can transform their lives and those in the community. It's a model for the future with 800 million people involved worldwide at present. There is an alternative. Consider being part of it. Thank you very much for watching.